Have you ever planned your path so carefully, only to watch life turn in a direction you never expected? Have you ever prayed for clarity, and instead found yourself walking through fog, unsure where the next step would lead? If so, tonight's story is for you. We'll rest upon the quiet wisdom of Proverbs 16:9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. It is a verse not of uncertainty, but of comfort. It reminds us that even when our plans unravel, God's hand is still upon the thread. That the roads we never meant to take may lead us exactly where grace intends. So tonight, we'll walk beside Levi, a humble traveler from Galilee, whose life was full of plans, and whose journey taught him what it means to truly trust the one who directs every step. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders ease. Let the noise of the day fall away. And if these stories bring you peace, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more nightly reflections, and share where you're listening from tonight. Your presence here keeps this space warm and growing, a small fellowship of hearts resting together in God's Word. Now, close your eyes if you wish, listen to the rhythm of your breath, and let your heart grow still. Because tonight, we'll walk a slower road, the kind only faith can follow. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Now, take another slow breath. And imagine a narrow path of dust winding through the hills of Galilee, the first light of morning spilling gently across the stones, and a traveler setting out, certain of his plan, yet unaware that heaven has written a different story for his day. The morning light spread gently across the hills of Galilee, soft and golden, touching the olive trees and waking the quiet fields. Levi walked the narrow road with purpose in his step. His pack was small, his staff steady in his hand, his eyes fixed upon the horizon. He had planned this journey carefully, every turn, every stop, every hope. He whispered to himself, "If I follow this path, I will reach the city by nightfall, and my life will finally begin as I have dreamed." The sound of his sandals brushed against the dust of the road. The air was warm, fragrant with the scent of wild thyme and earth. A flock of birds lifted from a nearby tree, their wings flashing silver in the sunlight. Levi smiled faintly. He took it as a sign of blessing, that his plans were unfolding just as they should. But the road ahead, though clear in the morning, began to change as the day grew older. Clouds gathered in the sky, soft at first, then darkening. A cool wind moved through the valley, bending the tall grasses, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Levi looked upward, frowning slightly. "It will pass," he murmured. "I know the way." He pressed forward, his steps quickening. The first drops began to fall, slow, round, and warm against his skin. The sound of thunder rolled faintly through the hills. He drew his cloak tighter, the path beneath him darkening with wet earth. The road he had chosen began to split in two, one way leading down toward the river, the other bending up into the hills. His plan had not mentioned this divide. Levi stopped. The rain fell harder now, streaking down his face, soaking the edge of his cloak. He looked at both paths and whispered, "I was sure this was the way." The wind answered with silence. No voice spoke, no sign appeared. Only the whisper of rain upon the stones. He sighed deeply. "I planned this," he said quietly. I was certain. His hand tightened on his staff. He had built his life on certainty, on knowing where each step should lead. But now the map within his mind was blurred. He felt the weight of the unknown pressing close. Finally, he chose the road leading toward the river, a path less worn, but sheltered by trees. The water's song in the distance gave him comfort. As he walked, the rain softened. The leaves above him trembled with droplets, releasing them one by one. The sound was gentle, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. He followed the winding trail until he reached the edge of a wide river, its surface rippling with light. He paused there, breathing deeply. The air was fresh, cool, and still. For a moment, all was peace. But when he turned to cross the small bridge that would take him onward, he stopped again. The bridge was gone. The flood from the rain had carried it away. Only broken planks remained, floating downstream like fragments of his plan. Levi dropped his head, rain still dripping from his hair. "Why, Lord?" he whispered. "I planned my way. I thought you would bless it." His voice trembled. The silence that followed was heavy, yet within it, there was no anger. Only waiting. He stepped closer to the water's edge, watching the current carry the broken pieces of wood away. They drifted calmly, effortlessly, obedient to the flow that guided them. The river did not fight its direction. It simply moved, steady, sure, unhurried. And for the first time, Levi wondered if that was what faith looked like, not control, but surrender. He stood there a long time, listening to the soft rush of water. The storm began to fade, the clouds parting slowly. A shaft of light broke through the sky, falling across the river like a bridge made of gold. Levi breathed deeply, his heart still aching but quiet now. "Maybe this is the path," he whispered. "Maybe the detour is the plan." He found a dry stone nearby and sat down, his cloak heavy upon his shoulders. The sound of the river soothed him, constant, alive, full of unseen purpose. He closed his eyes for a moment and whispered, "Guide my steps, Lord, for I no longer know where they lead." The breeze brushed his face, cool and gentle, as if heaven had answered not in words, but in touch. He smiled faintly through the fading rain. "Then lead me," he said softly. "Even if it is through the water." And there, beside the river, as the storm drifted away and sunlight touched his face, Levi's journey truly began, not the one he planned, but the one God intended. The sun emerged slowly from behind the clouds, its light spilling like liquid gold across the surface of the river. Mist rose in gentle waves, curling between the reeds and drifting into the quiet air. Levi sat upon the smooth stone, his cloak damp but warm beneath the growing light. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, the scent of rain, the hush that follows thunder, the silence that feels like God listening. He looked at the water before him and whispered softly, "I planned the road, yet you sent the river." His voice trembled with a mix of confusion and wonder. He had always trusted reason, trusted structure, trusted what he could map and measure. But this turning, this change, it was not part of his plan. And yet, it felt sacred somehow, as though heaven had breathed upon the detour. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small loaf of bread, breaking it in half. Steam rose from its center. He ate slowly, his gaze still upon the current. Every piece of the broken bridge that floated downstream caught the sunlight for a moment before vanishing into the bend of the river. "That was my plan," he murmured. "Strong, certain, simple. And you let it drift away." The breeze stirred again, cool against his face. It moved the reeds gently, and in their whisper he thought he heard an answer, not spoken, but felt. "You must lose the map to find the way." He closed his eyes, letting those quiet words settle within him. His mind drifted back to all the times he had prayed for guidance, yet secretly prayed for control. He had asked God to lead, but only along roads he recognized. "I wanted you to follow me," he whispered, "not the other way around." The confession left his lips like breath, simple, honest, free. He sat there in the silence that followed, and the peace that met him was deeper than apology. It was forgiveness. When he opened his eyes again, he noticed something he had not seen before. Across the river, partly hidden by the slope of the hill, stood an olive tree, tall and graceful, its leaves shimmering silver and green in the light. Beneath it, a faint path wound upward through the rocks, glinting faintly like a thread of light. Levi stared at it for a long moment. That road had not been in his plan. But now, it called to him. He stood slowly, tightening his cloak around his shoulders. The river between him and that new path glimmered wide and restless, but shallow near the bend. He stepped toward it, the water swirling cool around his ankles, then his knees. Each step sent ripples outward, catching the sunlight like small stars dancing on the surface. The current tugged at him gently, as if testing his resolve. He whispered, "If this is your way, Lord, then I will follow." Halfway across, he lost his footing for a moment. The water splashed high, cold against his face. He steadied himself with his staff, breathing hard. "I can't see the bottom," he said aloud, "but you can." The current answered with its steady hum, the sound both wild and reassuring. Step by step, he crossed the river. When he reached the other side, the sunlight broke fully through the clouds. It poured across the hillside in a radiant glow, painting every leaf with gold. He looked back once. The road he had planned was gone, swallowed by mist. But ahead, the new path shone clear and quiet, leading upward. Levi smiled faintly, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "So this is what it means," he whispered. "Not to be lost, but to be led." He began to climb the path, his steps slow, his breath steady. The air grew warmer, fragrant with wildflowers blooming in the cracks of stone. Each step felt guided, placed by something wiser than himself. There was no map now, no certainty, only trust. And as he climbed, he found himself praying, not with words, but with rhythm, with movement, with surrender. Every breath was prayer. Every heartbeat said, "Lead me." When he reached the crest of the hill, he stopped and turned. Below him stretched the valley, the road he had left, the river that had carried his plans away, the sky still wet with light. From that height, it all made sense. The storm, the detour, the loss. Every twist had formed a path that only heaven could have drawn. He smiled through tears and whispered, "You were leading me all along." The wind moved through the olive branches above him, soft and sure. The sound was like an answer. It said what his heart already knew, that when a man surrenders his way, he finds God's. Levi sank to his knees upon the hilltop, hands open, heart still. "Direct my steps," he whispered, "even when I cannot see." And as he prayed, a dove rose from the olive tree beside him, its wings white against the fading sky, a sign, a whisper, a promise. He watched it disappear into the horizon, and the peace that filled him then was not fragile. It was steady. It was divine. The sun drifted lower in the sky, its warmth spreading like honey across the hills, turning the fields of Galilee into waves of gold. Levi sat beneath the olive tree at the crest of the hill, the earth cool beneath him, the sound of wind moving softly through the leaves. He closed his eyes and listened, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet that had settled inside him. For the first time in his life, that quiet did not feel like emptiness. It felt like presence. He whispered, "You have led me here, though this was never part of my plan." The air was gentle, the branches above him swaying as though in agreement. He leaned back against the trunk and remembered the day before, how sure he had been, how clear his path had seemed. He smiled faintly at the memory. "I thought I knew the way," he murmured. "And still, you knew better." He lifted his gaze to the valley below. From this height, he could see the road he had once followed. It wound along the river like a long thread of silver, disappearing into mist. What had seemed confusion from below now looked like design, each curve, each turn, each delay placed perfectly to bring him here. He whispered, "So this is how you work, Lord, not through my certainty, but through your mercy." He let his eyes wander over the land, the olive groves shimmering in the light, the distant flocks grazing peacefully, the smoke rising from far-off homes. Every detail, every shadow, every sound seemed alive with meaning. It was as if creation itself was breathing in rhythm with his heart. He thought of all the times he had forced his steps forward, all the doors he had pushed open with his own strength. How often had he called them blessings, when they were only distractions? How often had he mistaken his restlessness for faith? He shook his head softly. "I see now," he whispered. "You were not behind my plans, you were ahead of them." He rose slowly, brushing the dust from his cloak. The wind caught its edge, lifting it gently. Below him, the valley shimmered with color, greens, golds, deep shades of brown. The sound of the river reached his ears again, softer now, peaceful. Every part of the world seemed to whisper the same truth, that his detour had not been mistake, but mercy. He took a slow step forward along the path that continued over the crest of the hill. It curved gently toward the horizon, its stones worn smooth by many feet before his. He did not know where it led, but that no longer mattered. The question that once haunted him, "What if I take the wrong road?" had faded into something quieter. What if every road leads home? He walked for a while beneath the fading light. The shadows stretched long across the path. The song of crickets began to rise from the grass. He felt the coolness of evening settle upon his skin. And with every step, He felt the weight of control slipping further away, replaced by something lighter, something like trust. He thought of the words of the proverb again: "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." He spoke them aloud, slowly, feeling each word settle in his chest. "You direct, I follow. You lead, I learn." Ahead, the path curved toward a cluster of fig trees. The scent of their fruit hung in the air, sweet and heavy. Beneath them sat a shepherd, his flock gathered close. He looked up as Levi approached and smiled. "Traveler," the shepherd said, "you've come far. The night will be cool upon these hills. Sit and share bread." Levi smiled and sat beside him. The shepherd tore a piece of bread and handed it to him. They ate in silence for a while, the sound of sheep moving softly around them. The stars began to appear one by one, quiet lights scattered across the deepening sky. After a long while, the shepherd spoke. "I used to wander too far," he said, "always chasing a path I thought was mine. But the sheep taught me something, that even when they stray, the shepherd knows where to find them." Levi looked at him and nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "He always knows." The shepherd smiled faintly and said no more. He reached for his staff and leaned it against his shoulder. The quiet between them was peaceful, a silence that spoke of understanding deeper than words. When the bread was finished, Levi rose. The night had deepened, the sky full of stars. He looked to the horizon, a thin silver line of moonlight tracing the road ahead. He felt no urgency, no fear, only peace. He turned to the shepherd. "Thank you for the bread." The man nodded. "Thank the one who led you here." Levi smiled and began to walk again, the stars bright above him, the path glowing faintly in their light. Every step echoed with trust. Every breath whispered, "Lead me, Lord." And as he walked into the deepening night, the words of the proverb lingered softly in his mind, not as reminder, but as promise. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." He no longer needed to know where the road ended. It was enough to know who walked beside him. The night deepened across the hills of Galilee, the stars shimmering like scattered candles in the sky. The air was cool now, the kind of cool that carried both quiet and meaning. Levi walked along the path with slow, steady steps, his staff tapping softly against the stones. The road curved gently downward toward the valley, where the faint glimmer of a village could be seen, small lights flickering in the distance like fallen stars resting upon the earth. The words of the shepherd echoed in his mind, "Even when they stray, the shepherd knows where to find them." He repeated them under his breath, the rhythm of his steps keeping time with their truth. "You know where to find me," he whispered, "even when I lose myself." The path grew narrow, winding between low stone walls that marked the edges of fields. The scent of wildflowers still lingered in the air, sweet and faint beneath the weight of night. Crickets sang from the grass. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called softly. The world around him felt alive, yet peaceful, as though creation itself was praying in silence. Levi stopped for a moment and looked up at the sky. The constellations shimmered in perfect stillness, endless, unhurried, sure. He thought of how his life had once felt the opposite: restless, hurried, uncertain. He had tried to move faster than grace. He had tried to plan what only God could see. He smiled faintly and whispered, "You never asked me to understand the stars, only to follow the light." He took a deep breath and walked on. The sound of his sandals brushed against the dust. His shadow moved before him, long and slender under the moon. The more he walked, the lighter he felt, as though with every step he laid down another weight he had carried for years. The weight of control, of expectation, of fear. He reached a bend in the road where the stones were uneven, and his foot caught upon one. He stumbled, catching himself with his staff. For a moment, his heart raced. Then he laughed softly. "Even this stumble," he whispered, "belongs to your plan." The laughter faded into a sigh of contentment. He looked ahead again. The path sloped downward now into the valley, where a river wound between clusters of fig and cedar. The moonlight shimmered upon the water, tracing its curves like a living ribbon of silver. Levi smiled. "You led me by water before," he said softly. "Perhaps you are leading me there again." He followed the sound of the river until he came to its bank. The current was slow here, its surface smooth, reflecting the moon as though heaven itself had stooped to look at its own reflection. He knelt beside the edge, cupped his hands, and drank. The water was cool and clear. He splashed some upon his face, feeling its freshness wake him fully. "Thank you," he whispered. "For the road, for the day tours, for this moment." He sat upon a nearby rock, watching the river glide past. Every ripple caught the light, moving calmly toward a destination unseen. "You move like this," he said quietly. "Not in haste, but with purpose. Every drop knows where it is meant to go." He thought then of his old life, the plans, the striving, the countless times he had pushed forward when peace had told him to wait. He shook his head gently. "I mistook movement for progress," he said softly. "But you move through stillness." A soft wind rose from the east, brushing against his hair, carrying the scent of cedar and salt. He looked toward the horizon where the faintest line of light hinted at the coming dawn. "You are ahead of me already," he whispered. "You always were." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small stone, smooth, pale, and round. He had carried it since the beginning of his journey, a token of his plans, a reminder of what he thought he needed to build. Now he turned it over in his hand, feeling its weight. "I thought I would build something with this," he said softly. "But perhaps it was meant to remind me that you are the builder." He placed the stone gently into the river. It slipped beneath the surface with barely a sound. Circles spread outward, slow, widening, endless. "Take even this," he whispered. "Let it be part of your design." The circles shimmered in the moonlight until they disappeared into the calm flow of the water. Levi closed his eyes and listened, the steady rhythm of the river, the faint rustle of trees, the heartbeat of creation. It all seemed to say the same thing: you are being led. He breathed deeply. "Then lead me still," he murmured. even if it is one step at a time. The stars shifted above him as the night began to soften into morning. The sound of the river grew quieter, blending with the wind. Peace filled his chest, not the peace of arrival, but the peace of surrender. He whispered once more, his voice barely above breath. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Then he smiled, resting his hands upon his knees, and waited for the first light of dawn. The first light of dawn began to rise over the valley, slow and tender, spreading across the horizon like a breath of gold. The river shimmered in its glow, every ripple catching fire with morning. Levi sat still upon the rock, his cloak heavy with dew, his heart quiet and full. The world was waking, but within him, something deeper had already awakened. A stillness that no plan could create, a peace that no uncertainty could shake. He whispered softly, "So this is what it means, not to walk in my way, but in yours." The sound of the water moved beside him like a song, gentle, continuous, full of life. It reminded him that every stream begins as rain from heaven, falling without pattern, yet always finding its way back to the source. He smiled faintly. "You are the source," he murmured, "and every step leads home to you." He rose slowly, stretching his arms, feeling the ache of the journey in his body. The path before him wound upward again through the trees, dappled with light. The day promised warmth. He began to walk, his sandals pressing softly against the damp earth, his staff tracing a quiet rhythm beside him. As he walked, he thought of all the paths that had brought him here, the planned ones and the ones he resisted, the doors that closed, the bridges that broke. Each moment that had once seemed like failure now looked like mercy. Each loss had turned into direction. He whispered, "You never withheld what I needed, only what would have led me astray." The birds began to sing in the branches overhead. Their songs overlapped in pure, careless harmony, unplanned, yet perfect. Levi smiled as he listened. "Even they do not worry about where the wind will take them," he said softly. "They trust the sky." He walked for a long while through the forested hills, sunlight streaming through the leaves in ribbons of gold. Every beam that touched the ground felt like a sign, not loud, not demanding, just present. It felt like God saying quietly, "I am here." He stopped beside a small spring that bubbled between the rocks. The sound was soft, almost hidden, like laughter beneath breath. He knelt and drank, the water cool upon his tongue. "You give enough for today," he whispered. "Not all at once, but enough." He looked around and saw wildflowers growing in the cracks of the stone, small, fragile, yet impossibly alive. Their roots had found water where none seemed to flow. "Even they know where to look," he said. "They do not chase the sun, they turn toward it." He sat there for a while, letting the sound of the spring wash through him. Memories drifted to mind, the mornings he had risen early to plan, to measure, to decide. The nights he had lain awake, afraid to lose control. He smiled softly. "All that time," he whispered, "I thought I was walking toward you, but you were walking toward me." A gentle wind stirred through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. It moved through the branches with a sound like a sigh. Levi closed his eyes and let it touch his face. He could feel the rhythm of something larger, the breath of creation itself. "You direct more than steps," he said quietly. "You direct the wind, the water, the heart." He rose and continued walking. The path curved gently upward again, opening to a high meadow bathed in morning light. The view took his breath away. The valley spread out below, the river gleaming like a ribbon of light, the distant villages glowing soft and small. From here, everything looked peaceful. From here, nothing felt lost. He whispered, "You see like this always, don't you? Above it all. Beyond it all." He stood there, letting the sunlight warm his face. The world felt both vast and near, like the sky was close enough to touch. He thought again of the proverb, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." Each word now carried weight, not of instruction, but of intimacy. He whispered, "You are not just directing my path, you are walking it with me." A small bird landed near his feet, pecking lightly at the ground before taking flight again. He followed its movement with his eyes until it disappeared into the open blue. He smiled faintly. "Free," he said softly. "That is what trust feels like." He stayed in the meadow for a while, breathing in the quiet joy of the morning. The road ahead glowed faintly with sunlight, winding onward beyond sight. He did not know where it would lead, only that he no longer needed to. For the first time in his life, not knowing felt like peace. He whispered, "Your way is better, even when I cannot see it." The wind answered with a soft sigh through the grass. He smiled again, lifted his staff, and began walking toward the light. Each step felt sure. Each breath felt full. And though he still carried no map, his heart was certain of this: he was being led. The day grew warmer as the sun climbed high above the hills, a bright, patient light that softened the stones and painted the path in shades of gold. Levi walked steadily onward, each step unhurried, each breath measured and calm. The air was fragrant with blooming myrtle and the faint sweetness of wild honey carried by the wind. His cloak brushed gently against the tall grass, and the sound it made seemed to blend with the hum of creation itself, a quiet symphony of peace. He had walked this far with no plan, no destination drawn by his own hand. Yet strangely, he did not feel lost. Every turn of the path seemed to arrive exactly where it should. Every moment of pause felt purposeful. It was as though the earth beneath his feet already knew his next step before he took it. He whispered softly, "You write the way before I walk it." As the hours passed, he came to a small village nestled among fig trees and vineyards. Children ran along the narrow streets, their laughter echoing against the walls of stone houses. Women drew water from a well, their voices low and musical as they spoke. The scent of fresh bread drifted from an open doorway, warm and familiar. Levi slowed his steps, smiling faintly. He was a stranger here, yet he felt no unease. The peace within him seemed to speak louder than his name or his purpose. A baker standing near his door looked up and said, "Traveler, you look weary. Come in. Rest." Levi bowed his head in gratitude and entered. The shop was simple, shelves of round loaves still steaming from the oven, a table near the back where light poured in through a single window. The baker's wife handed him a small loaf. "Eat," she said kindly. "The road is long." Levi broke the bread and ate slowly. It was soft and warm, the kind of bread that carried comfort in every crumb. He smiled and said softly, "You give what is needed at the right time." The woman chuckled. "It is not I," she said. "It is the Lord who brings the hungry to my door." Her words sank deep into him. He looked down at the loaf in his hands, thinking of all the ways he had tried to provide for himself, all the times he had run ahead of God, afraid that provision would not come if he waited. "And yet it always comes," he whispered, "just when it is needed." After his meal, he thanked them and continued on his way. The road curved beyond the village, leading once again into the open fields. The vineyards stretched far and green beneath the sky. Workers moved among them, their laughter rising like song. Levi watched them for a moment and smiled. "Each plant knows where to grow," he said softly. "Its roots do not question the soil." He walked until the sun dipped toward the western hills, its light turning the sky amber and rose. Shadows stretched long upon the path. He found a quiet spot beside a low wall, where a fig tree spread its branches wide. The fruit hung heavy and sweet, and he picked one, tasting its honeyed flesh. "Even here," he whispered, "you feed me." He sat beneath the tree, his back resting against its trunk, and watched the sky shift colors. The wind moved gently through the leaves, carrying whispers that seemed almost like words. He closed his eyes and listened. "You do not need to know the way," the whisper seemed to say. "You only need to know me." He smiled, a soft sigh escaping his lips. "Then I will walk with open hands," he murmured. "Not holding, not grasping, only receiving." The stars began to appear, faint, scattered lights above the fading blue. A few fireflies glowed in the tall grass nearby, their light pulsing softly like living prayers. Levi lay down upon the earth, his cloak spread beneath him. The night air was cool, the scent of fig leaves rich and sweet. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "Each of them knows its place. So do I, even if I cannot see it." He felt no fear. The road ahead was unseen, but his heart rested in the hands of the one who saw it all. Every turn, every pause, every unseen step was already known. He closed his eyes, his voice soft as breath. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." And as the night deepened, and the crickets sang their hymn to the stars, Levi drifted into sleep, not the restless sleep of worry, but the peaceful sleep of one who trusts the path beneath his feet. The morning came quietly, soft as breath upon the fields. The first rays of light touched the leaves of the fig tree, turning them to gold, and a gentle wind moved through the branches, waking the world with its tender sigh. Levi stirred beneath his cloak, the cool of dawn still upon his skin, and for a moment he did not move. He simply listened, to the hush of the earth, to the distant song of a bird, to the rhythm of peace that seemed to hum beneath creation itself. He whispered softly, "Another day, another step you have prepared." He sat up slowly, brushing the dew from his cloak. The valley below shimmered with early light. The vineyards stretched wide and glistening with morning moisture. A few workers were already gathering among the vines, their figures moving slowly, quietly, with purpose. Levi smiled faintly. "They wake to labor," he murmured, "but they do not make the sun rise. It rises for them." He stood and stretched, feeling the ache of the road in his shoulders, the good ache that comes from progress, not struggle. Then he lifted his staff and began to walk once more. The path wound gently between the fields, the grass bending underfoot, the scent of earth rising with every step. He walked slowly, unhurried, each step a prayer, each breath a hymn. He thought of all the days before, the storms, the rivers, the day tours. He could see them clearly now, how each one had turned his heart a little closer toward trust. "You were teaching me all along," he whispered. "Not through answers, but through patience." As he walked, he noticed a young boy ahead, struggling to lift a bundle of branches along the path. The weight was too much for him. The bundle slipped, scattering sticks across the road. The boy sighed and sat down, his small hands covering his face. Levi smiled gently and approached. "Let me help you, little one." The boy looked up, surprised. "It is too heavy," he said softly. "Then we will carry it together," Levi replied. He gathered the branches, tying them with a length of rope from his satchel. "Where are you taking these?" "To my father," the boy said, pointing toward the far side of the valley. "He builds fences near the pasture. I told him I could carry the wood alone." Levi nodded slowly. And sometimes the Lord lets us try, until we remember that we are not meant to walk alone." The boy tilted his head, not quite understanding, but sensing something kind in the words. Together they lifted the bundle and walked the road. Levi carried the heavier end, letting the boy walk ahead to guide the way. Their steps fell into rhythm, the path stretching bright before them. After a while, they reached the pasture. The boy's father stood there, mending the wooden fence beside a grove of trees. When he saw them, he smiled broadly and waved. "You found help," he called out. The boy grinned. "He came when I needed him." Levi laughed softly, setting the bundle down near the fence. The man thanked him warmly. "The Lord must have sent you," he said. "We prayed for strength this morning, and he sent hands instead." Levi's eyes softened. He often answers through steps we did not plan. The man nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, that is how he works." They shared a meal, bread, figs, and cool water from a clay jar. The simple meal felt sacred. The boy laughed as he ate, his joy easy and pure. Levi watched him and thought, perhaps this too is why I was led here, not to reach the city I planned, but to share the road I was given. When the meal was done, Levi rose to continue his journey. The man clasped his hand. "May your path be guided by the Lord," he said. Levi smiled gently. "It already is." He turned and walked back toward the open road. The sun was higher now, warm upon his shoulders. The land stretched endlessly before him, a quilt of green fields and golden light. He no longer wondered where it led. Each moment was its own destination. As he walked, he prayed, not for direction, but for awareness. "Let me see your hand in every turn," he whispered. "Even in the ones I would not have chosen." The wind stirred softly, brushing his face like a benediction. It carried the faint sound of laughter from the pasture, the boy's voice, bright and free. Levi smiled and said, "You direct even the smallest step, even the ones that lead to someone else's need." He walked on, his shadow long before him, his pace light. The road shimmered beneath the sun, winding gently into the distance. Somewhere beyond the hills, a new turn waited. But Levi did not hurry toward it. For he had learned that peace was not waiting at the end of the path, it was walking beside him all the way. He whispered softly, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." And with that prayer resting in his breath, he walked on, steady, calm, free. The sun drifted westward, long shadows stretching across the quiet road, the air cooling with the slow descent of day. Levi walked through a field of tall grass that swayed gently with the wind. The world felt wide and unhurried, as though even time had surrendered to the peace of the hour. Every sound seemed softer now, the whisper of the breeze, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a heron gliding over the river. He paused for a moment, letting his staff rest against his shoulder, and turned his gaze toward the fading light. The sky above him glowed with colors only evening can paint, rose and amber melting into pale blue. "Every sunset," he whispered, "is a reminder that even endings are beautiful when you are in them." He smiled faintly, then continued walking. The road narrowed again between two low hills, the air scented with wild thyme and the faint sweetness of figs ripening in the distance. Each step echoed gently beneath his feet. There was a rhythm to it now, not of urgency, but of peace. It was as though his feet moved to a song he could not hear, yet somehow knew. As he walked, his thoughts turned to all he had left behind, the plans, the ambitions, the path he had once traced in his own mind. For so long, he had believed that purpose meant achievement, that meaning was found in reaching a place he had chosen. But now, he saw it differently. The purpose, he whispered, was never the destination, it was the walking with you. The path curved and opened to a gentle rise overlooking a quiet lake. The surface of the water mirrored the sky, glowing faintly as if heaven had come down to rest upon it. Levi approached the shore and knelt, touching the water's edge. It was cool against his fingers, alive, rippling, patient. He cupped his hands and lifted a small pool of it toward the fading light. The reflection shimmered in his palms, and he whispered, "Even water follows the hand that shapes it." He let it fall back into the lake, watching the ripples expand in widening circles. "So do we," he said softly. "When we let go of control, we return to the rhythm of your will." He sat there for a while, the stillness settling around him like a cloak. The lake seemed endless, its edges lost in shadow. The sound of small waves brushing the stones was steady and kind. He felt as though he was sitting beside the very heart of peace. A fisherman appeared at the far end of the shore, his silhouette tall against the water. He was drawing in his nets, working with quiet patience. Levi watched as the man lifted each net, emptying it into his small boat. When he finished, he waved and called out, "Evening, traveler." Levi rose and approached. "Evening," he replied. "You have caught much today." The fisherman smiled. "Enough. Some days the nets are full, some days they are light. But the Lord provides through both." Levi nodded slowly. "I am learning that same truth upon the road." The man looked at him curiously. "And what do you seek, traveler?" Levi paused for a long moment. The question was simple, yet it touched the deepest part of his heart. Finally, he said, "Once, I sought the end of my plan. Now, I seek only to walk where he leads." The fisherman smiled knowingly. "Then you will never be lost." Levi helped him pull the last of the nets ashore. Together they worked in silence, two strangers united by the quiet understanding that trust is stronger than certainty. When the nets were folded and the boat secured, the fisherman offered him a small piece of bread and smoked fish. They ate together by the water's edge as the final light of the sun melted into night. After a while, Levi said softly, "Do you ever fear the storms upon the lake?" The man smiled. "The storms come when they please. But I have learned not to curse the wind. It is often the same wind that carries me home." Levi looked out over the darkening water and felt the truth of it. The same trials that once frightened him now felt like direction, the hand of God pushing him not away, but toward. He whispered, "Then perhaps I, too, have been carried home without knowing." The fisherman nodded and stood. "Then rest, traveler. The water will keep its peace tonight." Levi thanked him and found a place near the reeds where the ground was soft. He spread his cloak and sat, watching the moon rise above the lake. Its reflection shimmered across the ripples. Two moons, one above, one below, heaven and earth reflecting each other. He smiled faintly and whispered, "So it is with your will and mine. When I trust you, they mirror each other." He lay back upon the earth, the night wrapping him in stillness. The sound of the waves lulled him toward rest. And as he closed his eyes, the peace within him deepened, steady as the tide, gentle as the wind that whispered through the reeds. He murmured once more, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." And the lake, shimmering beneath the moonlight, seemed to nod in agreement, its quiet rhythm echoing the truth that every wave, every detour, every step, was already known by God. The night passed like a prayer whispered to the stars, soft, unbroken, full of peace. The moon drifted slowly across the heavens, painting the water with silver light, and the world seemed to breathe in perfect stillness. Levi lay upon the earth beside the quiet lake, his cloak drawn around him, his thoughts resting in the rhythm of the waves. Each rise and fall of the water felt like the gentle pulse of creation, steady, eternal, sure. When morning came, the first light was faint, a pale blush upon the horizon. The mist lifted slowly from the lake, curling upward like incense in a silent temple. Levi sat up and breathed deeply, the air cool and alive. He whispered softly, "Another beginning, another chance to follow where you lead." He rose, brushed the dew from his cloak, and looked toward the hills ahead. The path there was faint, barely visible through the wild grass. It led away from the lake, winding upward into the highlands where the morning sun glowed behind the clouds. He smiled faintly. "You give just enough light for the next step," he said softly. "No more, no less." He began to walk, his staff steady in his hand, the sound of the water fading behind him. The earth beneath his feet was soft with moss and soil, damp from the morning mist. The song of birds filled the air, sparrows, doves, and larks weaving their melodies together like threads of praise. Levi listened and smiled. "Even their flight," he whispered, "is a step you direct." The climb was gentle at first, then steeper as the path rose along the hillside. From time to time he paused to rest, leaning upon his staff, his gaze sweeping across the valley below. The lake shimmered in the distance, framed by silver mist and morning gold. It looked far away now, yet it felt near, not as place, but as peace carried within him. Halfway up the slope, Levi came upon a traveler descending, an older man with weathered eyes and a satchel full of scrolls. They greeted one another, bowing slightly as their paths crossed. "Peace to you," the old man said. "Where are you bound?" Levi smiled. "Wherever the Lord directs my steps." The man nodded with a knowing smile. "Ah, then you walk the hardest and holiest road of all." Levi tilted his head. "Do you not plan your way?" "I do," the man replied gently. "But plans are like ink before rain. They hold shape only until heaven breathes." Levi chuckled softly. "Then I have felt that rain many times." The man smiled. "And yet you are still walking. That means the hand that wiped your plans away was gentle." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind stirring the edges of their cloaks. Finally, the old man reached into his satchel and handed Levi a small scroll. "Take this," he said. "It is a proverb, an old reminder I carry when the road feels uncertain." Levi accepted it with gratitude and unrolled it slowly. The writing was faint, but clear. "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." Levi smiled, his eyes glistening. "It follows me wherever I go." The man nodded. "Because it is written not only upon parchment, but upon the heart of every believer." They exchanged blessings and parted ways, the old man descending toward the lake, Levi continuing upward toward the light. As he walked, he kept the small scroll in his hand, the parchment fluttering softly in the breeze. It felt like a reminder and a promise both, that even this encounter had been written by unseen hands. By midday, the hilltop opened into a plateau where wildflowers grew in waves, yellow and white and violet, swaying gently in the wind. Levi sat among them, the sun warm upon his face. He unrolled the scroll once more and read it slowly aloud. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." He closed his eyes and repeated it again, not as instruction but as worship. "The Lord directs, always." The wind passed through the flowers, bending them all in the same direction, a field moving as one body, guided by something invisible yet sure. Levi smiled through tears. "Even they obey," he whispered. "Even they trust the unseen wind." He lay back upon the earth, letting the petals brush against his face, the sunlight warm upon his closed eyes. Every part of him, body, breath, and soul, rested in that moment. He felt no pull to move, no fear of stillness. Only peace. And in that peace, a thought rose within him like a soft voice. "You are not lost, Levi, you are being led." He breathed deeply, tears slipping quietly down his cheeks. "Then I will walk wherever you choose," he whispered. "Even if I never see the map again." Above him, a dove soared through the open sky, its wings white against the blue. It circled once above the field, then flew onward, steady, graceful, free. Levi watched it until it disappeared into light, and his heart whispered what his lips did not need to say: "I am home wherever you are." The afternoon sun floated high above the hills, bright and patient, watching over a world that seemed to rest in its warmth. Levi remained upon the plateau for a while longer, the wildflowers brushing against his hands like waves of color moved by the wind. Every petal shimmered beneath the light, every blade of grass swayed with grace. It was as though creation itself was breathing in harmony with heaven. He whispered softly, "You guide even this, the breeze that bends the flowers, the light that finds their faces." The words left his lips like a prayer without form. He no longer needed to ask. He only needed to acknowledge that all things, great and small, were led by the same unseen hand. After some time, he rose again, lifting his staff and beginning to walk across the meadow. The path wound onward through fields of gold, and each step felt lighter than the one before. The road curved downward into a grove of cypress trees, their tall shapes whispering softly as the wind passed through them. The shadows there were cool and kind, dappled with moving light. The scent of resin and earth filled the air. Levi walked slowly beneath the tall trees, his mind still upon the proverb. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." He repeated it with each step until the rhythm of the words matched the rhythm of his breath. It became more than a verse, it became heartbeat and guidance all at once. He smiled faintly. "You do not ask me to stop planning," he whispered. "Only to let you lead where my plans end." The path wound deeper into the grove until it opened into a small clearing. In the center was a well, its stones covered with moss, its rope old but strong. Levi approached and peered inside. The water below glimmered faintly in the sunlight that slipped through the trees. He drew the bucket slowly and tasted the cool water. It was sweet and clean. He drank deeply, then rested beside the well, listening to the stillness. His journey had carried him far, through rivers and storms, through solitude and song. Each place had given him something he had not known he needed. Each step had removed another layer of self-reliance. He whispered, "You were never far ahead of me, Lord. You were beside me all along." The sound of footsteps drew near. Levi turned and saw a woman approaching the well, carrying a small jar. She smiled shyly as she neared. "Peace to you, traveler." "And to you," Levi replied gently. She lowered her jar and began to draw water. "You have walked a long way," she said kindly. Your sandals show it. Levi chuckled softly. The road is long when one walks by plan, he said, but shorter when one walks by faith. She paused, curious. And does faith always know the way? He shook his head. No. It simply trusts that there is one. She smiled, filling her jar. Then you are wiser than most who pass through here. Levi's eyes softened. Wisdom is not mine. It is given through surrender. She lifted her jar and nodded. May your surrender bring you peace. He bowed slightly. It already has. The woman turned to leave, her footsteps light upon the earth. Levi watched her go, her figure soon disappearing between the trees. Her words lingered, though, echoing softly in his mind, "May your surrender bring you peace." He looked toward the well again. The reflection of the trees shimmered upon the water's surface. The sunlight danced between them like gold dust upon glass. He saw his own reflection there, weathered, calm, changed. "Peace," he whispered, "is what grows when trust takes root." He dipped his hand into the water and let it flow through his fingers. The ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection, then settling again. "So it is with life," he murmured. "It may tremble for a moment, but the surface returns to stillness." He lingered there until the light began to fade into the warm tones of late afternoon. The air cooled, carrying the scent of cypress and water. Then he stood, tightening his cloak, and began walking once more. The path rose gently from the grove, leading him toward open fields where the wind moved freely again. The sky above him deepened into the soft gold of evening. The clouds glowed like embers fading at the edge of day. Levi lifted his face to the light and whispered, "You have directed my every step, not through signs and wonders, but through quiet mercy." The wind brushed against his cheek, carrying warmth from the west. He smiled faintly. "Even the wind," he said, "moves only as you allow." He walked on until the cypress grove was far behind him. The path ahead glowed faintly in the light of the setting sun, straight and simple now, stretching toward the horizon. He did not know what waited beyond it, but for the first time in his life, he did not need to. He whispered softly, "You do not change the road to fit my desire, you change my desire to fit the road you've chosen." The sky darkened slowly. The first star appeared above the western hills. Levi stopped and looked toward it, his heart swelling with quiet gratitude. He whispered again, "Direct my steps, Lord, and I will follow without fear." And as he continued down the glowing path beneath the wide evening sky, the peace within him deepened, not because he had reached his destination, but because he had learned that the journey itself was home. The last light of evening melted slowly into twilight, the air thick with the fragrance of earth and pine, the sky deepening from gold to violet. Levi walked quietly along the narrowing path, the rhythm of his steps soft and steady. The horizon glowed faintly behind him, the sun's last whisper before surrendering to night. Above, a few stars appeared, scattered like promises across the heavens. The world around him had grown still. Even the wind seemed to rest. It was the kind of stillness that carried meaning, a quiet that felt alive. Levi drew his cloak tighter and breathed deeply, letting the coolness fill his lungs. "Every ending," he whispered, "is only the beginning of another leading." He walked until he reached a wide field, its tall grass shimmering faintly beneath the moonlight. In the center stood a single olive tree, old and wide, its branches spread like open arms. Levi smiled faintly and made his way toward it, feeling drawn by something unseen. When he reached its shade, he sat beneath the trunk and rested his staff beside him. The air beneath the tree was cool and gentle. The leaves above whispered softly in the wind, their sound like 1,000 quiet prayers. Levi leaned his head back against the bark and closed his eyes. The peace that surrounded him felt sacred, not the peace of comfort, but the peace that follows surrender. He whispered, "You have led me far from where I began, and yet, somehow closer to where I belong." The memory of his old road flickered faintly in his mind, the one he had mapped so carefully, the one that had vanished in the storm. He thought of the bridges that had broken, the turns that had confused him, the plans that had dissolved like mist. Each loss had felt painful then, but now, looking back, he saw the pattern. Every detour had been direction. Every ending had been the beginning of something better. He smiled through tears. "You never let me wander, only learn." A nightingale began to sing from the branches above him, its voice soft, clear, and full of longing. The song rose and fell, weaving through the silence like a thread of light. Levi listened, his heart tightening gently with emotion. The bird sang not because it had light to see, but because it trusted that morning would come. "So must I," he whispered. "So must we all." He rested his hands upon his knees and looked out across the field. The moon had risen high now, turning the grass to silver. Every blade swayed together, moving as one under the invisible hand of the wind. "Even they follow your rhythm," he said softly. "They do not ask why the wind blows, they simply move with it." The night deepened further, wrapping the world in velvet quiet. Far away, an owl called, slow, solemn, wise. The sound echoed through the valley, then faded into silence again. Levi's eyelids grew heavy, but his spirit remained awake, aware of every sound, every breath, every pulse of life around him. It was as though the whole world was praying in stillness. He thought again of the words that had followed him all this way. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." They had once sounded like instruction. Now they sounded like intimacy. Not command, but companionship. He whispered, "You are not the voice above the road, you are the road itself." Tears slipped quietly down his cheeks, not from sadness, but from the sheer gentleness of truth. "All this time," he murmured, "I thought I was finding you. But you were leading me before I even knew to search." The wind rose softly, brushing the leaves above him, moving through the field like a sigh of mercy. Levi closed his eyes again and let the sound wash over him. It was the same voice he had heard by the river, in the rain, in the silence. Always the same, patient, tender, constant. "You do not rush," he whispered. "You wait until I am ready to follow." The nightingale's song faded slowly, replaced by the quiet rhythm of insects whispering in the grass. Levi leaned his head against the tree once more and breathed deeply. His body was tired, but his soul felt weightless, unburdened by tomorrow, untroubled by plans. The moment was enough. He whispered one final prayer before resting his eyes. "Direct me still, Lord, even in my sleep. Let my dreams follow your footsteps." The night listened. The wind stilled. The stars shimmered above like eyes full of love. And beneath the olive tree, the traveler closed his eyes, not in weariness, but in trust. His breath slowed, his heart calmed, and his spirit settled into the rhythm of divine peace. The Lord directed his steps still, even in rest. The dawn came softly once more, as it always did for those who waited in peace. The first light reached across the horizon like a gentle hand, brushing against the silver leaves of the olive tree, touching Levi's face as he slept beneath its shade. The wind had quieted in the night, and now it stirred again, not cold, not strong, but steady, carrying the scent of new day and distant rain. Levi's eyes opened slowly. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the quiet hum of the earth. The world seemed to whisper welcome, the soft rustle of grass, the call of a dove, the slow return of light. He smiled faintly and whispered, "You have kept me again through the night." He rose, brushing the dew from his cloak, and stretched his arms toward the warming sky. His muscles ached, but it was the kind of ache that felt holy, the ache of a heart stretched wider by trust. He looked at the path that continued beyond the field. It curved upward toward the ridge where the morning sun shone brightest, as if inviting him onward. "Then onward I go," he said softly. "Not because I know the way, but because you do." He walked slowly, his sandals pressing against the soft, damp soil. Each step left a faint mark that vanished as the wind brushed over it, a quiet reminder that not every step needs to be remembered, only the one who guided it. The field behind him shimmered in the rising light, and the olive tree stood like a guardian watching him depart. As he walked, the air grew warmer, the sky brighter. The world began to stir, farmers leading their donkeys to the fields, shepherds calling softly to their flocks, the faint ring of tools in the distance. Life had begun again. Levi smiled as he passed a small stream, its water flowing over smooth stones, clear as glass. He knelt to drink, cupping his hands carefully. The coolness touched his lips and seemed to reach straight into his soul. "Every drop," he whispered, "is guided by gravity, and yet, by you." He continued along the stream until he came upon an old man sitting upon a low rock, mending a fishing net. The man looked up and smiled. "Peace to you, traveler," he said. "The day is young and the fish are wise." Levi chuckled softly. "Then you and I have both learned to wait upon the Lord." The man's eyes brightened. "Ah, so you are a man of patience." Levi paused. "No," he said gently, "but I am learning it." The man nodded. "Learning to wait is learning to trust." "And trust," he added, tying another knot in his net, "is the thread that binds every journey." Levi sat beside him. "I have walked far," he said softly, "and every road I planned has vanished beneath my feet. But still, I have never been lost." The fisherman smiled, still working with quiet hands. "That is the mystery," he said. "The road disappears only when it begins to be seen." Levi tilted his head, smiling. "Then I am seeing it clearly now." They sat together for a while in silence, the sound of the stream flowing beside them. The old man hummed a small tune, something wordless, ancient, tender. It mingled with the sound of water and breeze until it felt less like music and more like prayer. Finally, the man said, "When the river changes its course, do the fish curse it?" Levi shook his head. "No. They turn and swim with it." "Then so must we," the man said softly. "For the Lord redirects as gently as the water carves the stone." Levi looked down at the river, the same truth flowing before him in motion. The current did not fight. It simply moved, certain of its purpose even when it curved unseen. He whispered, "Then I will flow where you lead." The old man smiled again. "Then peace will follow you wherever you go." Levi rose and thanked him for the wisdom. "May your nets always find what they need," he said kindly. The man laughed. "And may your feet never fear the turns." Levi smiled and continued walking, the sound of the stream fading behind him. The sun was high now, warming the path ahead. Every breeze that brushed his face felt like a reminder that guidance was not always loud, not always sudden. Sometimes it was the quiet pull of peace, the gentle nudge that said this way. He walked until the path opened again to the wide plain. In the distance, he could see a village, small houses scattered like white stones upon the hills. He paused, his staff resting lightly in his hand. The old Levi, the planner, the striver, would have hurried forward. But this Levi, this new heart, stood still first. He listened. He waited. And only when his heart felt that quiet tug of peace did he take the next step. He whispered as he walked, "You direct my steps not through signs in the sky, but through stillness in the soul." The wind carried his words away like prayer. The olive fields swayed in answer. The path glowed faintly in the afternoon light. And Levi's shadow, long, soft, and sure, followed behind him as though even it, too, trusted the one leading the way. The afternoon ripened into gold, the light spilling across the plain like honey poured from heaven. Levi walked slowly toward the distant village, each step unhurried, his heart quiet and full. The road beneath him was lined with olive trees, their branches heavy with fruit. The air was rich with their scent, warm, earthy, sweet. It felt like walking through a living psalm. He touched one of the trees gently as he passed. The bark was rough, old, strong. "You have stood here many seasons," he whispered. "The rain bends you, the sun dries you, yet still you grow. You do not resist the seasons. You let them shape you." The leaves above shimmered in reply, whispering softly in the wind. He smiled. "Then teach me to bend without breaking." He continued along the path until he reached a small ridge overlooking the valley below. From there, he could see the rooftops of the village, red clay glinting in the afternoon sun, smoke rising from chimneys, a river winding behind it like a silver thread. The sound of distant laughter drifted faintly through the air. The sight filled him with warmth. "Life continues," he murmured. "Always. Even when one journey pauses, another begins." He sat upon a rock and looked out over the valley. The same truth he had felt on the hilltop days before returned to him, that God's guidance was not always about arrival, but about awareness. He whispered, "You are not waiting at the end of the road, Lord. You are walking within every step." He watched the wind move through the valley, turning the fields into waves of green and gold. The sight reminded him of the river, the birds, the flowers, the trees, each moving in obedience to something unseen. None questioned where they were sent. None doubted the one who sent them. "So simple," he said softly. "So sure. Creation never doubts its maker." He closed his eyes and listened. The rustle of the leaves, the low hum of bees, the cry of a distant hawk, all seemed to merge into one great whisper: trust. He breathed deeply. "Then I will trust you in all things, in the detours, in the waiting, in the silence." He rose from the rock and began walking again. As he descended into the valley, he came upon a group of children playing by the roadside. They laughed and chased one another, their joy echoing like music in the still air. When they saw him, they paused and waved. One of them, a little girl with dark hair and bright eyes, ran up and offered him a wildflower she had picked. "For you, traveler," she said with a smile. Levi accepted it gently, his voice soft. "Thank you. It is beautiful." The girl giggled. "Mama says flowers grow where God smiles." Levi knelt down to meet her eyes. "Then he must be smiling here very often." She laughed and ran back to her friends. Levi held the flower for a moment, a simple white bloom, delicate as breath. He tucked it into the folds of his cloak and whispered, "You send reminders even through children. You do not speak only through storms, but through small kindnesses too." As he continued down the road, he thought about all the ways God had spoken to him, through rivers and rain, through strangers and silence. Never through force, always through gentleness. "You are a quiet guide," he whispered. "But your guidance never fails." When he reached the village, the streets were narrow and bright. The people moved about with calm purpose, vendors arranging baskets of figs and dates, women drawing water from the well, old men sitting together beneath the shade of the archways. The sound of life was everywhere, yet peaceful, unhurried. Levi walked through it as though walking through a song, the rhythm of ordinary grace. He stopped at the well where a young man was filling a clay jar. "Peace to you," Levi said. "And to you, traveler," the man replied. "The road has brought you far." Levi smiled. Far enough to know that distance is only the measure of trust. The man looked puzzled but smiled politely. "Then may your trust never end." Levi nodded, lifting his eyes to the sky. The clouds drifted slowly, glowing white against the deep blue. "Nor will it," he whispered. because you never cease directing what you began. He walked through the market, past the sound of laughter and trade, until he found a quiet courtyard at the edge of the village. A small fountain stood there, its water trickling softly into a pool surrounded by lilies. He sat beside it, closing his eyes. The sound of the water was familiar, the same steady rhythm that had followed him through every part of his journey. "You have never left me," he whispered. "Not once." He reached into his cloak and touched the small wildflower the child had given him. It had begun to wilt, but its fragrance lingered. He smiled. Even fading things carry beauty when they remind us of you. He leaned back against the cool stone of the fountain and breathed deeply. The peace within him was no longer something he was seeking. It was something he carried. It was the quiet knowing that every moment, every turn, every face, every pause, had been exactly as it should be. He whispered softly, "You direct not only my steps, but my heart." And as the shadows lengthened across the courtyard, and the evening breeze brushed his face, Levi knew that his journey had become something far greater than travel. It had become trust itself. The sun descended gently toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of amber and rose. The last light of day rested upon the rooftops of the small village, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Levi sat near the fountain still, watching the ripples of water shimmer with the colors of the dying sun. The air was warm and still, filled with the faint scent of bread baking somewhere nearby. Each sound, each moment, felt deliberate, as if time itself was slowing down to breathe with him. He whispered softly, "You have brought me here, and though I do not know why, I know you are here too." He rose slowly, taking his staff once more, and began to wander through the narrow alleys as evening settled over the town. Lamps were being lit in doorways, one by one, small flames flickering like prayers. The light fell across the cobblestones in thin golden lines, guiding his way forward without haste. He smiled faintly. "Even now," he murmured, "you light my path one step at a time." As he walked, he passed a small courtyard where an elderly woman sat upon the steps of her home, weaving a basket by lamplight. Her hands moved slowly but surely, each strand bending smoothly beneath her touch. Levi paused and watched for a moment, drawn by the rhythm of her work. "Peace to you," he said quietly. She looked up and smiled. "And to you, traveler. You walk gently, like a man who listens before he speaks." Levi chuckled softly. "Perhaps I am learning to listen to what cannot be seen." The woman nodded knowingly. "Ah, then you are close to wisdom." He approached, watching her hands move in quiet precision. "Your weaving is beautiful," he said. "Each strand seems to know where to go." She laughed softly. "It does not know. It only yields. My hands decide its place." Her words settled into him like truth spoken from heaven. "So it is with us," he whispered. "We are the strands, and you are the weaver." The woman looked at him curiously. "You speak as one who has walked far." Levi smiled. "Far enough to see that distance does not matter when the path is guided." She nodded, continuing her weaving. Then may the one who guides your path finish the work he began. Levi bowed his head. He already has, he said softly. In my heart. He thanked her and continued walking, her quiet presence lingering like a blessing. The road led him toward the edge of the village, where the hills rose once more against the evening sky. The last light glowed upon their crests, gentle, golden, holy. He felt drawn to them, as if the voice of God whispered from the horizon. He followed. As he climbed the hill, the world below grew small, the houses, the streets, the people, all fading into shadow. At the top, the wind greeted him with open arms, cool and clean. The sky stretched vast above him, now deepening into indigo, the first stars blinking awake one by one. He stood there for a long moment, letting the silence sink into his bones. His staff felt light in his hand. His cloak brushed gently against his ankles. Every part of him was calm, the kind of calm that comes only when all striving ceases. He looked to the heavens and whispered, "Every step, every turn, every delay, was you leading me home." His eyes filled with quiet tears. "I wanted control," he said softly. "But you offered companionship. I wanted clarity, and you gave me peace. I wanted answers, and you gave me yourself." The wind moved around him again, brushing through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint sound of distant bells from the valley below. The air shimmered with that sacred stillness, the kind that hums with divine nearness. Levi closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He whispered, "I see it now. The road never belonged to me. It was always yours. I only had to walk it with open hands." He knelt upon the earth and placed his palms flat against the ground. The soil was warm, pulsing faintly with the heartbeat of life. "You are in this," he said quietly. "In the earth beneath me, in the wind that moves around me, in the silence that fills me." He raised his eyes once more toward the stars now scattered across the vast sky. Each one shone like a note in a song only heaven could hear. "You direct even them," he whispered. "They move in paths unseen, yet never stray." The peace within him deepened, a peace that no reasoning could explain. He understood now that faith was not blind obedience, but seeing the unseen hand in every moment. He smiled softly through tears. "Even when I thought I was lost, I was walking straight into your will." He remained there for a long time, his heart still, his soul light. The stars turned slowly overhead, their movement silent but sure. And as the wind continued to flow gently around him, Levi whispered his final prayer for the night. "Direct my steps tomorrow as you did today, even if tomorrow's road looks different from what I dream. For I no longer ask for certainty, only closeness." The wind answered with a hush, not of silence, but of presence. It felt like a whisper from heaven itself, "I have never left you." Levi smiled, his tears glistening in the starlight. "Then I am home," he said softly. "Wherever you are." And under that vast canopy of stars, with peace flowing through him like a river of light, he rested in the knowledge that every step, past, present, and still to come, had always been perfectly directed by the hand of God. The night deepened into quiet, the stars scattered above like whispers of light upon velvet sky. Levi remained on the hilltop, his cloak drawn close around him, his eyes tracing the slow path of the constellations as they drifted westward. The earth beneath him was cool and solid. The wind that moved across the grass was tender and low, a language without words. It carried with it the faint sound of the village below, the bark of a distant dog, a closing door, the hush of life settling into sleep. Levi breathed deeply and closed his eyes. His thoughts no longer reached for understanding. They simply rested. Every question that had once kept him awake had softened into peace. He no longer needed to ask why, for the answer had been given not in explanation, but in presence. He whispered softly, "It is you who has walked beside me all this time." The stars shimmered faintly in response, their light steady and ancient. He remembered the first days of his journey, the storm, the broken bridge, the doubt that had nearly swallowed him whole. How small those fears felt now, in the light of what he had learned. "You were in the storm," he murmured. "You were in the silence after. You were in the river that carried my plans away." He opened his eyes and looked toward the horizon, where a faint silver glow hinted at the coming dawn. The first promise of light. "And you are already in tomorrow," he said softly. "Before I take another step, you are there." He leaned back upon the grass and watched the sky shift slowly. The longer he gazed, the more the stars seemed to move like living things, not random, not chaotic, but graceful, each one tracing its perfect course. "Even the heavens obey your path," he whispered. "How could I not trust mine?" The night breeze passed over him again, brushing through his hair, cool and clean. It smelled faintly of cedar and salt, as though it had traveled across sea and sand just to reach him. He felt small beneath the vastness of the sky, yet not insignificant. He felt known. "You see me," he said quietly. "You always have." He turned onto his side and looked down toward the valley where the river shimmered faintly under moonlight. Its gentle curve glowed silver, winding through the land like a thread of grace. The same river he had once feared, now looked like a ribbon of purpose stitched into the earth. Every bend, every change in its path was beautiful. "You teach through everything," he whispered. "Even through what once frightened me." He grew still again, letting the rhythm of his breathing blend with the rhythm of the night. The sound of the wind and his own heartbeat merged into one slow song, the music of trust. He remembered the people he had met, the shepherd beneath the fig trees, the boy carrying branches, the woman drawing water, the fisherman mending nets. Each one had been placed upon his road like stepping stones of faith. None of them had been chance. "You wove every meeting," he said softly. "Each one a reminder that your hand moves in all things." He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening in the starlight. "You were never teaching me how to reach a place. You were teaching me how to walk with peace." The air grew colder as the hours passed. He pulled his cloak tighter, his heart steady and warm. He thought again of the words he had carried in his soul since the beginning. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." They no longer sounded like correction. They sounded like a lullaby. He whispered, "And so you have." Every turn, every delay, every wonder and wound, all of it has been you leading me toward yourself. A shooting star crossed the sky above, swift and bright. Levi watched it fade into the horizon. Even those that fall, he murmured, do not fall outside your hand. He lay back once more, his staff resting beside him, his heart wide open beneath the heavens. The silence was full, not empty, not lonely, but overflowing. It felt as though all creation breathed with him. Every sound, every light, every whisper of wind was saying the same thing: you are not alone. He closed his eyes again, and peace wrapped around him like a soft cloak. You direct the steps of the righteous, he whispered. You uphold them with your hand. His breathing slowed. The stars turned overhead. The night folded into stillness. Somewhere deep within, he knew, tomorrow's path would come as every path had come before, one step at a time, unseen but certain, guided by the same gentle voice that had led him through the storm, the valley, and the silence. He smiled faintly. Then I will keep walking, he whispered. Even if the next step is through shadow, even if it leads to rest. The wind brushed softly against his face again, and his heart answered in calm agreement. It was not a farewell, only a pause. The journey would go on, beyond roads, beyond hills, beyond sight. For once a soul learns to trust, the path never truly ends. Levi whispered one last time before sleep took him, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And with that truth resting over him like light itself, he drifted into rest, not the restless sleep of travelers, but the still sleep of one who knows he is home. The first touch of dawn came quiet as grace, spreading slowly across the sky like oil poured upon calm water. The stars faded one by one, and the breath of the world changed, that subtle stirring when night yields to light. Levi stirred beneath his cloak, his body warmed by sleep, his heart still humming with peace. For a moment, he did not move. He simply listened. The wind was gentle, the earth still, and in that stillness he could feel the pulse of creation itself, soft, steady, alive. He whispered into the light, "You have given me another day." He sat up, brushing the dew from his cloak, and gazed toward the horizon. The sky glowed faintly with threads of gold, streaks of pink, and the promise of blue. The world seemed to awaken slowly, patiently, without rush. Levi smiled faintly. "The sun never hurries," he said softly. "Yet it always arrives." He stood and stretched, his body sore from the ground but renewed in spirit. He lifted his staff, feeling its familiar weight, and began walking down the hill. The valley below shimmered beneath the morning light, the same fields, the same river, yet somehow new again. It was as if each sunrise turned the familiar into blessing. He whispered, "Each day you begin again with me." The path was soft underfoot, damp from the morning dew. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of thyme and earth. Birds flitted between the branches overhead, their songs weaving together in gentle joy. Levi walked in silence, letting their melody fill the spaces between his thoughts. His heart felt light, not because the journey was over, but because he no longer needed it to end. He came upon a shepherd tending his flock near the stream. The man looked up, smiling. "Peace to you, traveler," he called. "And to you," Levi replied. "The morning is kind today." The shepherd nodded. Every morning is kind when one wakes beneath God's sky. Levi smiled. "You speak truth. Your sheep follow you well." The man chuckled softly. "They follow because they know my voice. But sometimes, I must go where they cannot see me first. I walk ahead to find the safe ground. They call for me, and though they cannot see me, they walk because they trust one am near." Levi's heart stirred. "Then you walk as he walks with us." The shepherd paused, his eyes softening. "Ah, perhaps that is why he calls himself the Good Shepherd." Levi nodded slowly, watching the man move among his flock, his hand resting gently upon the nearest lamb. "He leads us through valleys and hills," Levi said softly. "Through storms and silence. Even when we do not see him, he is there." The shepherd smiled. "Then we are never truly lost." Levi bowed his head in quiet agreement. "No. Only learning the path by trust." He thanked the man and continued walking. The sound of the flock faded behind him, replaced once more by the soft murmur of the wind. His steps were lighter now, each one steady, each one surrendered. The proverb echoed again within him, no longer as a lesson to remember, but as breath itself. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. He whispered the words aloud, slowly, letting the pauses between them stretch like calm waters. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Each pause carried meaning. Each word felt alive. He could feel the truth of it within his chest, not as thought, but as heartbeat. The road turned slightly and opened to a small clearing where a stream divided into two paths. One curved toward the north, winding through tall trees. The other stretched westward toward the sun, open and bright. Levi stopped. For a moment, he stood between them, silent. There was no sign, no voice from heaven, no sudden pull. Only stillness. He closed his eyes and placed a hand over his heart. "Which way, Lord?" he whispered. The wind moved softly across his face, warm and slow. It carried no words, only peace. And in that peace, Levi understood. Whichever way I go, you are already there. He smiled faintly, tears gathering in his eyes. Then the step itself is holy. He turned westward, where the light seemed to beckon him through the open field. As he walked, he felt no urgency, no fear. His steps were light, his spirit still. Each movement was both prayer and answer. The grass brushed softly against his legs. The wind moved behind him like a gentle companion. The day unfolded around him, birds in the air, flowers along the road, the scent of olive and grain drifting with the breeze. Everything seemed to move in rhythm, one with the other, as though creation itself followed the same invisible conductor. Levi whispered, "So this is what it means to walk with you. Not to know where, but to know who." His pace slowed. His eyes lifted toward the open sky. You are the direction itself. He stopped and let the moment sink deep into him. The sun was rising higher now, glowing bright upon his face. He closed his eyes and felt its warmth, its constancy, its life. You are light, he whispered. You guide without forcing. You lead without shouting. You wait without leaving. The peace within him expanded, filling every part of his being. There was no longer distance between his will and God's, only harmony. The road, the steps, the heart, the hand that led, all had become one. He smiled softly and whispered once more, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." And as the morning sun rose fully, flooding the earth with golden light, Levi walked onward, not as one searching, but as one found. His shadow stretched before him like a promise. Each step fell soundlessly upon the earth, yet every one of them echoed in eternity. The day moved slowly into fullness, the kind of still, golden hour when even time seems to rest its wings. The air shimmered faintly with warmth, the fields humming softly with the sound of bees and wind. Levi walked through that quiet glow like a man passing through a prayer, each moment alive, each breath sacred. His sandals pressed lightly upon the soft earth, leaving faint prints that faded almost as soon as they were made. The world around him was vast, yet he felt no smallness, only belonging. He whispered softly, "This is what peace feels like when it stops being something to seek and becomes something to live." A stream ran beside the path for a while, its water clear and bright, weaving between stones like silver thread. Levi stopped beside it and crouched low, watching the sunlight dance upon its surface. He dipped his hands into the flow and let the water run through his fingers. "You move where you will," he murmured. "You find every path, every hollow, every hidden place. You do not force, you simply flow." He watched the ripples stretch outward, touching stone after stone before disappearing into the curve of the stream ahead. "So do your ways," he whispered. "They reach what I cannot see." He sat for a while, resting by the water's edge. A dragonfly hovered nearby, its wings glimmering like glass, catching the light as it darted and paused, then darted again. Levi smiled faintly. "Even it," he said softly, "trusts the air beneath its wings." The peace around him felt alive, moving gently like the current beside him. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply, the scent of grass, of water, of sun upon stone. The same world he had once hurried through now felt infinite, every detail radiant with presence. "You were never silent," he whispered. "I was just too loud to hear." He stood slowly, his staff steady in his hand. The path curved again through a grove of acacia trees. Their branches formed a canopy above, filtering the sunlight into soft, moving patterns upon the ground. Each step he took felt measured by grace. There was no rush, no aim beyond the next breath. The sound of the stream faded behind him, replaced by the gentle hum of the wind through the leaves. He began to think of all the moments when he had doubted, the crossroads where he had hesitated, the nights he had feared the silence meant abandonment. Now, he could see how every silence had been guidance. "You do not always speak in words," he whispered. Sometimes you lead by peace alone. The path opened again, and Levi found himself upon a small rise overlooking the plain. The horizon stretched far and wide, glowing with the pale shimmer of afternoon light. He could see where the river wound its way toward the distant hills, the same river he had crossed long ago. Its reflection sparkled under the sun, a thread of silver stitching heaven and earth together. He whispered, "You bring all things back to their source." He walked down the slope slowly, each step soft and steady. The earth beneath him felt familiar, the texture of home. He realized, then, that home was not a place at all. It was this awareness, this calm knowing that wherever he stood, God stood too. A soft wind rose from the west, carrying with it the smell of rain though the sky was still clear. Levi lifted his face to it, closing his eyes. The air wrapped around him like a touch, gentle, tender, endless. He felt it press against his chest as if reminding him of the same spirit that breathed life into his lungs. "You are the air I walk through," he whispered. "The unseen path beneath my steps." He kept walking as the day began to wane. The shadows grew long, the light turning softer with every passing hour. Each breath, each sound, each step folded into stillness. The deeper he walked into that stillness, the more he felt carried, not by strength, but by surrender. He whispered, "When I tried to lead myself, I was weary. But when I let you lead, I found rest." The trees began to thin, revealing open fields once more. The sky was wide above, the color of faded gold. Levi looked around and felt as though all creation was exhaling with him, the wind slowing, the birds quieting, the light dimming into peace. "Even the day knows when to rest," he said softly. "So must I." He came upon a lone stone, half buried in the earth, worn smooth by weather and time. He sat upon it and laid his staff beside him. The ground beneath him was warm. The light fell gently across his face, wrapping him in the glow of sunset. He bowed his head and whispered, "You have been my guide in every season, in morning, in evening, in shadow, and in light." The air grew still. Even the breeze seemed to listen. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts drift like leaves upon quiet water. He felt no pull to move, no voice demanding direction, only the steady pulse of peace filling the silence. For the first time, he realized that perhaps this was the truest form of being led, not walking toward something, but resting in someone. He smiled faintly and whispered, "I need not see the road anymore, because I see you in the stillness." And there, in the fading light of day, Levi sat in perfect calm, the journey behind him like a long exhale, the future before him like a gentle promise. The Lord had directed his steps to this moment, this peace, this presence. And it was enough. The light of evening stretched long across the fields, soft and golden, wrapping the earth in a quiet farewell. The sky deepened slowly, from amber to rose, from rose to violet, until it seemed the very air itself was falling into prayer. Levi remained seated upon the smooth stone, his staff beside him, the warmth of the day still upon his face. The shadows around him lengthened gently, moving like the hands of time closing the pages of a peaceful story. He whispered softly, "The day bows before you, Lord, and I bow with it." A flock of birds crossed the horizon above, dark against the burning edge of sunset. They flew in perfect rhythm, turning and dipping together as though guided by an unseen hand. Levi watched them until they vanished beyond the far hills, and his heart swelled with quiet gratitude. "You direct even them," he murmured. "Not one moves without your will." He looked down at his hands, calloused from travel, weathered by sun and time. How often they had grasped and let go, built and broken, reached and rested. Every mark upon them told a story, not of strength, but of grace. "These hands have made many plans," he whispered. "But you have turned them toward better things." The breeze stirred softly through the tall grass, brushing against his cloak. The sound it made was low and steady, like the quiet rhythm of a heartbeat. Levi closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. "It is all guided," he said softly. "The wind, the water, the stars, and even this small life of mine." He could feel the truth of it, not as thought, but as peace. Every thread of his journey was woven into something vast and unseen. Every delay, every sorrow, every joy had found its purpose in this stillness. "You are not a distant director," he whispered. "You are the melody that keeps everything in tune." The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft afterglow, a lingering warmth upon the world. The first stars began to appear, trembling faintly in the violet dusk. Levi lifted his eyes toward them and smiled. "You have brought me full circle," he said softly. "From fear to trust, from striving to surrender." He rose slowly, taking his staff once more. The field before him shimmered in the dim light, silvered by the rising moon. Every blade of grass seemed to bend in worship. Every sound had softened into rest. He began to walk again, not because there was anywhere left to go, but because walking now felt like prayer. His steps were light, unhurried, sure. Each movement was guided not by need, but by love. He whispered with each step, "You lead me beside still waters, you restore my soul." The words hung in the air like song. He felt the presence of God in every direction, not above or beyond, but near. The wind brushed against his cheek like a friend's hand. The moon lit the path before him just enough to see. "Enough," he whispered. "Always enough." He came to a small rise where the land met the horizon, glowing faintly under the moonlight. He stopped there and turned, looking back over the road he had walked. The hills, the rivers, the trees, the distant village, all lay bathed in gentle silver light. Every place he had passed through seemed to whisper back to him now, as though the land itself remembered every prayer he had spoken upon it. He smiled faintly, tears glistening in his eyes. "You were in it all," he whispered. "Every breath, every silence, every turn. You were never waiting at the end. You were walking in the middle." He stood there a long while, listening to the soft chorus of night, the hum of crickets, the sigh of the wind, the distant rustle of water. It all sounded like worship. And in that sacred stillness, Levi realized something deeper than he had ever known, that being led by God was not about reaching a final place. It was about becoming still enough to recognize his presence in every place. He lowered his staff and pressed his hand against his heart, "You are here," he said softly. "And because you are here, I am home." The stars above brightened, filling the sky like countless lanterns lit in silent praise. Their reflections shimmered faintly upon his eyes, as if heaven and soul mirrored one another. The peace within him deepened, vast, complete, unmoving. He whispered again, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." The wind moved gently around him in reply, like the quiet exhale of creation itself. He smiled, his breath slow, his spirit calm. And as the night embraced the land in full stillness, Levi stood beneath the heavens, a single figure held within eternity, and knew that his journey, though still continuing, had already arrived where it was meant to. The night had grown full and deep, the sky vast and heavy with stars that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the earth below. The world was hushed, no wind now, only the slow, patient silence that comes when creation itself rests in its maker. Levi stood upon the rise still, his staff lightly in his hand, his cloak moving only slightly against the still air. The journey stretched behind him like a river of memory, every bend, every pause, every unseen turn shining faintly in the light of reflection. He breathed in slowly, filling his lungs with the cool night air. The scent of grass, soil, and moonlit earth mingled softly. His eyes lifted to the heavens, where the stars shimmered as though alive. He whispered, "You hold them in place, every one, and yet you hold me too." The thought filled him with quiet awe. The same hand that traced the paths of constellations had also guided his weary feet through valleys and storms. The same voice that spoke light into being had spoken softly into his heart when all had seemed dark. "You have never let go," he murmured. "Not once." He lowered himself to the ground and sat upon the earth, resting his staff across his knees. The soil beneath him was warm from the day's sun, steady and real. He pressed his hand against it, feeling its strength. "You made this earth," he whispered, "and you let me walk upon it. Not as a stranger, but as one known by name." The moon climbed higher, silver and still. Its reflection glowed faintly upon the river in the valley far below, winding like liquid light through the dark. Levi smiled faintly. "The river never stopped flowing," he said softly. "Even when I could not see its path, it moved, as I have moved in you." He leaned back and looked up again at the endless canopy of stars. Each one shimmered in its place, distant, yet near. The silence around him was not emptiness. It was fullness. It was the kind of silence that hums with meaning, the kind that holds words too holy to speak. He felt that presence again, the same quiet companionship that had followed him since the first day of his journey. It was everywhere now. In the ground beneath him, in the air around him, in the steady rhythm of his heart. He whispered, "You were never the destination, you were the road itself." His eyes closed slowly, and a smile touched his face. And the road was love. The words hung in the air like breath, sinking deep into the quiet night. He could feel them settle over him, wrapping his spirit in warmth, a peace beyond reason, beyond understanding. Every step, every trial, every tear had been love guiding him home. He lay back upon the earth and gazed once more toward the heavens. The stars above blurred faintly as his eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were the tears of one who had seen enough of life to recognize God's hand in all of it. He whispered softly, "You led me when I was blind, you carried me when I was weak, and you waited when I wandered." The words came slower now, softer, like the final notes of a song coming to rest. "You are my light in the morning, my peace in the night, my path in every step." The wind stirred once more, the faintest breath, brushing against his face, moving through the grass like a sigh of love. The stars above shimmered brighter for a moment, then stilled again, holding their place in perfect harmony. Levi's eyes drifted closed. His body rested fully against the earth. His breathing slowed, calm and steady. And in that stillness, one final whisper rose from his heart. "Direct me still, Lord, even when I no longer walk, for my spirit will follow where you lead." The world answered in silence, deep, eternal, and full of peace. The same peace that had followed him from his first step now surrounded him completely. The same voice that had called him onto the road now called him into rest. And in that moment, beneath the stars that God himself had set in their places, Levi's soul found its perfect home, in the presence of the one who had directed every step from the beginning. The night continued, calm and endless. The river shimmered softly below. The wind carried no sound but peace. And the words of the proverb echoed faintly through the still air, like a lullaby meant for eternity. "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps."